Hello, my name is Paul Frederick, and Paul Allen Frederick. The Allen needs to be there. And you are watching video number 20. Now here in video 20, I'm going to talk about the story Sangre, but I want to premise this story before you do. 2 years, 2 whole years before the graphic novel Cowboys and Aliens came out, I had this story. These are stories, these stories that I'm going over here. I guess there's only about 20 so of them that I'm going to be talking about as far as the treatments that I've already done. I've only done 20 some of my 32, so I still have quite a bit to go. But before the graphic novel, 2 years before the graphic novel came out, I had this story for Sangre. And I had a different name for it back then, but I had to change the title because of similarities to current graphic novels and movies by a certain most excellent Platinum Studios. And of course they did the great job of publishing Cowboys and Aliens and did an excellent job with the movie. Jon Favreau, I mean, come on, right? I mean, how great is he? So anyways, so I want to preface this by talking about that first, by saying that first. So some of it's going to seem a little familiar, but when you get down to the bones of it, I think when you get down to any of the detail at all, it really isn't the same deal. But it's more of a supernatural Western than it is a science fiction Western, but it definitely is science fiction. Okay, Sangre. A nun, a friar, a priest, 2 ex-slaves, a Confederate colonel, and a gunslinger find salvation in the journey of an exploration to a wild, mystical world of the small New Mexican town Sangre. They thought the trip to the small New Mexican town was rough. Wait till they get into town. That's when the real action starts. Okay, it's not a super great tag, but that's basically the tag. Sci-fi Western drama accentuating man's moral combat with righteous potential versus evil temptation. Forces of good and evil lie in Boot Hill, along with, of course, I can't name it Boot Hill because that's an old role-playing game. With our main characters and traveling companions. Captain Marshall William Arbuckle, an ex-Confederate officer, is privately hired by the Catholic Church to escort Bishop Bernini, Sister Mary Elizabeth, and Brother James Bishop. I'm not a bishop, my name is Bishop, says James. And 3 members of his own private security force to California's Mission 2 San Diego. Now on their way out to San Diego, they are supposed to pass through this town Sangre. And basically, okay, here's what's going on. I can read, but here's what's going on. At the very opening of this, what I have so far, the work I have done so far, is at the very opening of this is a very tortured-looking, seeming to be person barely knocking at the gates of a cathedral in Albuquerque, and he looks really rough, and he looks like he's been through hell and back. And comes in, they bring him in, and he's talking about this town Sangre and how he had to leave because of the evil, and he's talking about zombies, and he's talking about all this crazy stuff that's going on. Well, and then he dies in their arms. And then they take his shirt off to prepare him for death and for burial, and they find out that he's got a map tattooed on his back. And this map is to the town of Sangre. So that the priest that oversees that, the father or whatever they were called back then, I'm not quite for sure. That maybe father, probably the same. I'm not a Catholic, and I don't look to the Catholic Church for righteousness, but that is part of the story. And this definitely is a tale about finding personal righteousness and personal spiritual freedom versus the confines of supernatural definitions or the confines of man-made religious definitions. And that's what the story gets down to. And really it's about how the priest becomes more corrupt. He's corrupt and becomes more corrupt. The nun is extremely legalistic, and she becomes much more spiritual. She becomes much more free thinking and finds a great deal of more freedom in her relationship with Jesus than the priest, who ends up getting killed in the end. Now the two ex-slaves, who are both spiritual but not religious, help the nun find herself and find her own confidence. The Confederate colonel, who is a non-believer, kind of stays that way, kind of stays generally neutral. And the gunslinger for hire, the Gold Gun Kid, is or the gold revolver. I can't remember what I named him. It's in there. And basically he has gold-plated guns, and he calls himself that. And he's really well off, but he's actually secretly working for the U.S. government to keep an eye on the Confederate colonel, to make sure he doesn't try to do anything uncalled for, like start a new Confederacy over out in the western United States. And they think he could possibly be up to that. And we don't know whether he's up to that really up until the end of the movie, when we find out that his motives are pure. Not the colonel, not the gunslinger. The gunslinger is purely in it for the action, and he's expendable. So we can think about that. So anyways, so that's kind of what happens. And they go out there, and they have an incredible journey out there. I mean, just wild and crazy, and all kinds of supernatural stuff. And they're being followed by a ghost who they don't know if it's an actual person or if it's an actual ghost. They don't know. And he's always a couple miles away, or she, they're not quite sure. And so it's exciting. I think it's exciting. I'm sounding like it's really droll and boring, but it's not. It's so detailed and so long and lengthy that you literally have to read what's going on. For an example, once they reach into town, they find that the little cathedral, not a cathedral, the little chapel that was there was burned to the ground by the people who lived there. And so one of their missions is they're going to rebuild that. And they have 2 day laborers, which are the ex-slaves, who are actually getting paid well to make this trip. And that's why they're taking it, for the future of their potential children. And they want to get a life, and they want to get out of the South. And although they don't like the colonel ends up losing his prejudice because of these two, and who he finds out to be the most human out of everybody on the trip. And at night, there seems to be the people of the town all come out of their houses. Their skin is white and pasty, and they march off into the hills, and they look like they're dead, the Walking Dead. And they come back before morning starts every day. And then when day comes around, they kind of walk around town half awake, and so they don't know if they're zombified or what's going on. As it turns out, they're actually being manipulated by aliens, little grays. I want to definitely make it grays, and who are mining gold for their which I know. This was before I even heard of Cowboys and Aliens. Gold is the only reasonable answer because of its properties, and what it can do being out in outer space and how that can apply to a spaceship. But I could also make up a mineral that it has not been discovered by man, but is an actual mineral in the hills of New Mexico that is being mined specifically for long-term space flight. Something along those lines. We can make it work for sure. And so they're actually just normal, except they're having their minds are being controlled to do this work, to do this labor, and so that's why they're so pasty, and that's why they don't go out in the streets during the day. And they think, are these people vampires maybe? But it turns out there is a vampire in town, and he does only go out at night. And he is the sheriff, and he watches. He stays in the shadows during the day, and he watches these people go in and out, and he's investigated the whole situation, and he's okay with it, just as long as he's left alone. And that's all he cares about for anybody, just to leave him alone. He gets to consume the occasional citizen who is just counted as missing, and what they're doing in the middle of the night, they're going and working in a mine. I already said that. So, meanwhile, there's a total personal struggle going on with everybody, of accepting what is supernatural and accepting what could be supernatural, and accepting what is God and what God is all about. And it tackles some pretty big battles here in this one, and but it is well versed within the plot of what's going on in the story. And so a lot of that dialogue and a lot of that interaction, I have up in my head, but a lot of it I have down too, so that's good. So okay, that let's see, it's been about 12 minutes. That's enough time. That is video number 19, or is it video number 20? This is video number 20. Sangre. Next, we're going to talk about Stick Figure the movie.